I've played a lot of Commander, at a lot of different stores, all across the country. I've played against hundreds of players, and there's one mistake I see people make time and time again in Commander. And fixing this is probably the easiest way to improve your win rate. Before I get into it, this video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. You can use code TTM to get 5% off your order, and it supports the channel. Thanks to Cool Stuff Inc. for sponsoring the video. Commander is a complicated format. It's almost impossible to play a perfect Commander game. With 3 opponents and a massive card pool, there are simply too many factors to not make mistakes. This is why I'm in favor of allowing people to take back any play as long as information hasn't changed. Sometimes you miss something that was on board. This is especially true for webcam games. I made a pretty huge misplay on a recent stream with some patrons because I misread a card. I probably should have asked to take my play back, but whatever, it made the game more interesting, I think. You can check out the VOD here, I'll add a card. Misreading cards or missing triggers happens all the time in Commander, so I'm going to be skipping over that for this video. Instead, I'm going to be focused on decision-based mistakes rather than deck-building mistakes or rules-based mistakes. Before I get into the number 1 mistake, I want to talk about a few other smaller gameplay errors that people often make. I've wanted to talk about some of these for a while, but they're pretty minor and it's just something that can't be made into full videos, so I'll talk about them here. Priority jumping. This is a very common mistake. Basically, when one player casts a spell, and even though the next person in turn order should get the chance to respond first, another player excitedly slams down their own removal, and then the person next in priority gets to save their removal for another turn. I think players just need to slow down a little bit. When something threatening is cast, I know it's exciting when you get a chance to hit your opponent with a silly counterspell like Mind Swipe or Mana Tithe, but give your other opponents a chance to spend their removal first. It will help you in the long run. Speaking of slowing down, people need to slow down when changing steps and phases, especially for the combat phase. How many times have you run into this situation? Someone has a creature in play that has an attack trigger, and then they go from their main phase, playing lands, casting sorceries, to just saying, hey, I'm attacking you, trigger my Ulamog. People need to slow down, because combat is broken up into many steps, meaning I could remove the creature before we actually get to the point where it's attacking. Speeding through these phases also ruins the opportunity for politics. Maybe I'm the only one with removal. We could strike a deal where I don't remove the Ulamog, and you get to swing at someone else. But if you just say you're attacking me, well, I have no choice but to say, hold up, walk back to the start of combat, and then I'll remove it. So just like priority when a spell is cast, take it easy and remember, Magic is a turn-based game, not an RTS. There's no need to rush and skip through phases. The last common mistake I want to go over before I talk about the main one is dice on cards. Not really sure if this counts as a gameplay mistake or not, but it's my video on my channel, so I make the rules. Dice on cards should almost always be reserved for counters. I've seen people do so many confusing things. At a base level, when you have some card with varying power and toughness, don't put any dice on it. This happens all the time, where you make a construct token, which changes stats based on how many artifacts are in play. You count up 6 artifacts and put a dice on it. Then next turn you play some cards, and maybe you forgot to increase the number when you played an artifact land. Now the dice shows 8, but really, it should be 9. Then next turn your opponent attacks you, and you recount, realizing, oh, whoops, it was supposed to be 9, not 8. You can just walk it back and say, hey, let's go back to the start of combat, my bad, the construct's at 9, not 8. But that could have also affected what your opponent would have played before they went to combat. It just becomes kinda messy. The easiest thing to do is have no dice and just count whenever someone needs to know how big the construct is. I also see a lot of new players putting dice on creatures' stats to show how the stats have changed, and this is a total mess. It's really easy for this to get messed up. What is this creature? It's getting buffed by a lord, but also got some stats from this equipment, and it also has 2+1/+1 counters on it. And with all of this on 2 dice covering the power and toughness, it can be confusing. What if you forget that it had counters when that actually comes up? Or what if you forget to change the number when the Lord goes away? If something is not a lasting counter that stays on the card, don't place any dice showing anything. It's too easy to lose track of what's going on. Okay, on to the big one. The number 1 gameplay mistake has to do with attacking. More specifically, not attacking enough or spreading out damage. There are many times where I see someone ramp into a large creature, and then they just don't attack. You know the routine. They play a land, cast a spell, they look around the table, humming and hawing, and then they just pass. And it's not just when they have one creature. I've seen lots of players get ahead on board and just sit there with 20 power on board doing nothing. This is the biggest indicator to me that a player is going to lose. When they don't attack or they try and spread out the damage instead of focusing down the most threatening late game player. When someone does that, I know I don't need to worry about the elf ball deck going wide, since I'm never going to get attacked. That player can just be ignored entirely. And then after a few turns of them waiting around, a board wipe hits, they lose all their stuff, and someone else will win the game. I find it kind of ironic, since the vast majority of casual EDH players build decks where combat damage is the main win con, yet they don't attack nearly as much as they should. I've heard a wide range of reasons as to why players don't attack. I don't want to make enemies. They haven't attacked me. They haven't had a chance to do anything yet. These are all pretty silly. The making enemies argument might be the most valid out of the three, but honestly, if attacking someone for 5 damage early game is enough for that player to hold a grudge against you for the rest of the game, I'm not sure EDH is right for them. Chip damage can add up for sure, but most reasonable players won't freak out over a small hit like that. They haven't attacked me is another argument I've seen a few times, but it also makes no sense. If you always wait till your opponent has blockers, or they attack you first, then you're never really going to win with combat damage. Once I had a Super Friends player get mad at me for attacking his planeswalkers. He complained that he never attacked me, so there was no reason for me to attack him. Funny enough, the rest of the table agreed with him. Don't listen to these players. You should attack planeswalkers, even if they haven't cast any creatures or they have not attacked you. If they're going to play a planeswalker with nothing to back it up, you are free to attack it. That's on them. And not attacking someone because they haven't had a chance to pop off is a mistake that will cost you games. Yet people do it all the time. Oh, I can't knock that player out yet. They haven't had the chance to play their combo and win the game. These days, when most decks do their thing, it kind of means they win, or at least get pretty close to it. It's really hard to beat many decks once they actually pop off. I see this all the time, partially because I play a lot of goofy control decks with big late game value engines, so not attacking disproportionately benefits players like me. Lots of my decks are very slow and very greedy. I would have lost many more games if players just attacked me and didn't wait for me to get the One Ring with Tawanos in play. I get a lot of comments about players asking how to beat some strong deck in their playgroup, and the easiest answer is almost always attacking more. Just attack that player. Don't spread out the damage, don't roll a dice to choose who to attack. If Spike is playing some deck that is really strong late game, then the way to beat them is attack before we get to the late game, and tell other players too. You can vocalize to the table, hey, every game where this player gets 10 plus mana, they win. We should attack them now. I also don't think this is bad form. This is part of the self-regulating nature of EDH. It's why I'm not in favor of banning cards like Sol Ring. Once one person drops a Sol Ring and follows up with something big, oftentimes it means 3 players are going to focus down that Sol Ring player. It's the same thing here. If you play a really strong deck that's going to crush the table late game, your opponents have nothing to do but attack you. If you're still worried about the feels bads or think it's mean to knock a player out early, I'd say 2 things. First, it's not rude to attack a player for lethal. That is a normal part of the game. If your opponent doesn't play anything to defend themselves, that is not your fault. Everyone is somewhat responsible for their own fun. So if being attacked early is going to ruin their experience, then they should play ways to avoid that. Instead of playing nothing but ramp and card draw for 6 turns, your opponent might instead need to slow down and play a lower curve or pillow fort effects. Obviously, we're all trying to have a fun balance game of Commander, so use your judgment here. If their mana is screwed, I'm not saying you have to throw everything you can at them and take them out as early as possible. It's okay to give them a pass for a turn or 2, but you don't need to cater to your opponents so much that it allows them to build super greedy decks and just win every game. The second thing is, if you don't like attacking players, don't play creature decks. You don't have to win by attacking. You can build decks that win in a plethora of other ways. It's crazy to me when I see Typal decks and Voltron decks just pass turn without attacking me when my board is just Tawanos and a few baubles. I think if players attacked more, it would help a little bit with power imbalances at commander tables. More tuned and upgraded decks usually have better late game potential, often due to having better card draw and finishers. But if you attack more often, then that chip damage will make it harder for those decks to survive into the late game. So that's it really. Just attack more and don't spread out your damage so much. If someone is open, take a swing. Worried about not having blockers? Easy. See if the other players with a board will also attack the open player. Double up that damage. Alternatively, don't play creature-focused combat decks. If you don't like attacking, try Storm or Enchantress or maybe an artifact deck. I hear those are fun. Players not attacking is such a common mistake that it's actually the main reason I built my Goad deck. It forces people to take those swings and moves the game along. Link to the list in the description. Now, as always, this is just my analysis based on what I see. Do you also find players don't attack often enough? Is there some other mistake that you think people make even more often? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and special thanks to my tier 3 patrons, whose names you see here. If you want to be in the credits, check out the Patreon link in the description.